Okay, should I get going?
Yeah, so Patty's doing this remotely. Welcome. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to be clicking the slides and she can see you. How are you feeling, Patty?
Well, I'm a little bit better.
Yeah. COVID. So here it comes. But you got a big, wow, we have like 20 people in the classroom now. So I'll give it over to you.
All right. So hello, everybody. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm sure any number of you have had COVID, and I managed to escape it until very recently, but wrong timing. But I'm glad to at least be able to do this virtually and with Tim. So what I wanted to talk about today is about doing anthropology or bringing anthropology into consumer research. And consumer research could also be called insights work. Sometimes people now would call what I do design research. So any kind of research for commercial clients or institutional clients. Like I've also done work for Feeding America, Georgetown University, so nonprofit as well as for-profit places. So, okay, next slide, Tim. So, and the kind of thing that I want to talk about really is cultural analysis, and even more so my contention. I don't know how many of you are anthropology, majors or buffs or coming from related fields, but my contention is that in that kind of commercial world, when anthropological, ethnographic, or semiotic research or research on symbols really works, it kind of changes the frame, which means it upends how people are thinking. So you really change people's thinking rather than confirming what they're thinking about. And that changing can help to change people's assumptions, even as well as their questions, and, certainly gives new answers. So the examples, I want to give 3 examples today, and they're all work that I did together with Rita Denny. There, as you see in that book on the left, it's getting a little dated now, but I think the principles of that book still hold. Okay, Tim. So the examples I want to give are 3. So we have about 15 or 20 minutes for each example, but I want to try to do it so that we also have questions at the end. And I guess I'm just curious because, I just see you all as little black bibs. But do you see me on a large screen, or you see me on a little screen, or do you really see me?
Little screen.
A little screen.
Okay. The presentation's big.
Okay, the presentation's big. I'm little. Okay, so you won't necessarily see my expressions, but I will try to. I'll try to do my best to convey it. Okay, so we're going to talk about these 3 examples and then some questions. So the first one is milk. Okay, Tim. So milk was actually a study that was together with Milk PEP organization, which is kind of the dairy farmers trade group. So it's not really a for-profit, but they want, it's like the union for dairy farmers. They wanted to sell more milk. And so it was with that PEPFAR in conjunction with the ad agency. Now, I think you all probably know of these ads, these Got Milk ads with the white mustache. And so, this was coming off of that. And what was true, was actually sort of a fact, was that it seems if someone does not start to drink milk as a kid, they're never going to drink it as an adult. So you either start drinking milk as a kid or you're not going to do it later in life. So the ad agency had a very reasonable idea, you could say. Their sort of explicit assumption was it's about mothers. So children are drinking less and less milk, which was true. So they wanted to get mothers to get their kids to drink milk. That's what they charged us with. Like, tell us what to do so that we, the ad agency, can get mothers to get their kids to drink more milk. And the implicit assumption, just when I talk about milk, perhaps you're thinking about cows, perhaps now you're also thinking about oat milk and other kinds of milk, but you probably were thinking about, like on that slide, white milk in a clear glass. That's kind of the iconic, or that's the symbol of milk. So that's how we went into the study. So, okay, next slide. So what we found out, and the way we did this, we had mothers we kind of did focus groups or conversational groups where we seated diaries with some mothers, like little audio diaries. So they would keep sort of a diary of what it was like to be a mom. And we also did in-home interviews where we went into people's homes and saw what they were doing, saw what they were doing with milk and being a parent, being a mother, and so on. So one of the things that was so clear, and probably you know this if you give it just a little thought, is that being a good or even a great mom was the implicit standard and expectation for mothering. You know, kind of to be a good mother, the unsaid is like good mother, right? It's the, excuse me, it's the presupposed adjective. So in contrast, when fathers were like good fathers, it wasn't just assumed, but it was called out or remarked upon or something special, noteworthy, like, oh man, he's a great father, he's a good father. So, and even just as like a little bit of data, this was this one family's chore chart. And this family was really a family where the father was very involved, very attentive, very supportive. And you see on the chart when there's a sort of, issue and it's not clarified, it's ask mom. So, moms had a lot on their plate. Okay, Tim. So
Which one do you want to hear?
Yeah, what I want to do is play each of these and just as sort of what we did. These are part of the diaries that we used, and it was to sort of show how being a mom is not easy, and it's a very hard and fragile existence. So we just have to play them one after another, going down the left column and then the right column.
All right, here we go. Yeah. Go back here.
My oldest Cole, it's been a little bit of a struggle. He was diagnosed with speech delay and some sensory stuff when he was about 2 years old. So as a mom, I think you just kind of go into overdrive. And I had him in every therapy, everything that he could do. And he'll be starting kindergarten in the fall. And I just got his kindergarten evaluation. It was the first evaluation I've ever had that said that he was a normal, typical child in every way. And I think I wanted to start ball crying because it's been such a long journey, but a really great journey. And he's such a special little boy and a total normal boy. I mean, I think realizing that, boys, for the most part, have a lot of them have speech delays, and just trying to figure that out for them and put them into what they need to be to progress the most. So.
Oops.
I'm not perfect, not a perfect mother. Because I'm right now just going through my struggles. And I've lost a sense of who I am as a woman. I feel that right now I'm just here as a mother and a caregiver, basically. And sometimes I don't know who I am. But I have to find myself again. I find myself that when I was working and I had a career and I was out there, I was happier because I was among colleagues and peers and among adults. And just bring myself down, being unemployed and depending on Albert for money. It's very hard for me. I've always been independent woman.
I think being a mom can be a huge challenge. There are just a lot of real life hard things that happen every day, little things and big things too, you know, little things, just little messes and arguments. And then as they grow, I think their problems become bigger and more emotional, and there's a lot of dealing with that. And then, you know, I have to deal with things like, am I staying connected? You know, am I staying kind of sane through all of the minutia of my day? Am I staying connected to people? And am I remembering sort of what life is really about and not just about the nitty gritty of every day?
I like to take my husband and the kids grocery shopping together because it's good for Nathan to see how hard it is to do things like grocery shop with two kids. So I feel like it makes him appreciate me a little more. So we loaded up the kids in the car and we went to two places. You know, to me, I think it's great because he does get to see how hard it is. But you know, one of the frustrating things about, you know, parenting is that him and I parent differently. I mean, I'm with the kids all day long, every day. And when he comes home, he expects it to be a certain way. And he has, I guess, different rules sometimes. And so even things like going to the grocery store, he gets frustrated when the kids aren't doing anything bad. I mean, they're just running around like any normal day. But to him, it's loud and embarrassing. And so he gets upset really easily with the kids, which kind of drives me crazy because I'm like, they're not doing anything wrong. So that's kind of where we butt heads a little bit on how to, you know, parent. And he knows he's doing it, and he knows he shouldn't be getting upset with them. But in the moment, it's very stressful for him, which in turn makes it extremely stressful for me.
I get a phone call from the oldest school, Madilena. Mr. Tirado, disciplinary. And I was just informed that she has been suspended from school for cutting detention. She's supposed to have served detention. She didn't serve it. So supposed to serve detention on Friday. She didn't. So now she got suspended. And that's very frustrating when you think that everything is okay in school in terms of disciplinary in school. I became very upset because it's just very upsetting, and he just adds to the fire and tells me, don't check your emails because you do get progress reports, which I do. And actually that Monday morning I was gonna check my emails that I get for progress, and there she is, failing 6 classes. As a mother, she's failing, and as a mother, I feel that I'm a failure. And what am I doing wrong? I ask myself. Everybody can be a better mother. Everybody can be a better person. Everybody can do something better in life. You know? I just have to keep walking. I can't believe my husband's cleaning my house. He must have just looked around and thought the place was filthy, because that's what he does. Is he'll look around and he'll think that the place is just a complete mess, get totally irate, and clean things and throw things and cuss and swear and have the children hiding in the closet and so behind me and torturing everybody. And that's when he decides
because they were there with him all day, and I guess they've been tortured all day long. Listening to him rattle on about what a horrible mother I am, and he is that. That's what he tells them. Your mother has us living in a pigsty. If she just cleaned this crap up, we wouldn't be so sick. If she just do this or she just do that, or if she clean up after this, or if she just do more, everything would be so much better.
Okay, so I don't know what the mood is in the room there, but that whole, if she just do more, this was kind of what the ad agency was asking, really. If moms would just do more, if they would, do a little bit more to get their kids to drink milk, everything would be all right. And we were really trying to make the point to our client how hard it was to be a mom. And when we actually played all these audio bits for the client in a in-person presentation, and some of them were actually crying by this point. So, okay, Tim. So we were making the point that being an American mom is really difficult. The whole work of it, the striving to better, it's constant, and parents are always acting as, sculptors, guides, educators, protectors, support system, everything, right? And denying themselves. And, I was skipping over a lot, but there's also an idea of like socializing children in an atmosphere of loving, fun, family, pleasure, togetherness. Everybody's supposed to be happy. So we said, okay, Tim, that what needed to happen was that the ads really had to, or the ad agencies had to help the mothers lighten the load, help the mothers. So, that's why I'm saying, like, reframe it. Help the mothers. Don't add to the task by asking her to do something else, like getting their kids to drink milk. So we're saying enlist dad. So that could mean make dads the target rather than moms, or at least make dad a focus, or at least a partner in the efforts, as well as enlist others, just, it's almost like targeting the kids, cartoons, popular culture figures that kids seem to listen to with pleasure for the milk. And also add some pleasure and support, not another morally imperative should, because there was also in there, and that sort of implicit, the milk is like whitened in a glass. They had this idea, because people did do things like drink milk and cookies or milk and cake, but then, oh no, we can't be saying milk and cookies, or we can't be saying milk and cake, because that's kind of, pushing something that's unhealthy. Okay, Tim. So these were sort of, their one thing was, enlist dads. And I just bring this picture, or put this picture in there of the baby in the two hands. We were trying to make the point, this was part of why going in homes was so important. Something that, in the post-COVID world has been lost in a lot of, consumer research. But that when we were in these homes, we happened to notice in them, in more than one home, a very, this common picture of a baby held on the one hand by a woman's hand, on the other hand by a man's hand. But it was to really kind of show that people, at least in the ideal, liked the two-parent ideal. And the picture on the top there is a father who every day would bring out the kind of eating table for the kids. And in the bottom, another picture of a father where milk in their home was always bought, because it was put into these kind of like, milkshakes that were ice cream and then milk and chocolate syrup. And that was something that the whole family enjoyed. Okay, Tim. So now the other thing that was here was that, all the mothers, when we talked to them, all of them would say that, one of the things they believed in, they absolutely believed it, that milk was really good for building strong teeth and for strong bones. That, nobody doubted that milk could give their kids these nutrients, and parents like that. But the problem in the cultural world is that other beverages and foods could do that, so like calcium in the Tums, this young woman took, this young took the Tums to get her calcium, or it's in orange juice or in yogurt and all these other things, or just, vitamins themselves. And people also did have concerns about the hormones in milk. And also, very importantly, just looking at milk symbolically as a beverage, like other beverages all the time were consumed on the go, which milk was not. And they had specific places dedicated to their consumption, like juice bars or coffee shops. And, it was very interesting. It's very interesting, really, that like cappuccino and cafe latte, all these things that actually have a ton of milk in them, they just get understood as coffee, not as milk. Okay, Tim. So what we also said that the ad agency and, and thereby the client as well needed to do was to explode that whole white in the glass limitation. Because we were saying that if you just think of milk as that glass, in the glass and white, it keeps it circumscribed. So we wanted to say, you've got to relieve the guilt for pairing things with milk, whether it's that, ice cream, but it, recognize that in a cup frothed or with coffee is milk, with chocolate and syrup, it's milk. If there's fruit added, all these things, if it's in a cup, it's milk. So needed to get over that. And we also said they needed to create and extend occasions, give more cultural reasons for when you drink milk. So it could be with snacks, it could be iced and on the go, it could be late night. And, not abandoning meals, but not limiting to meals. And meals was all that was done at the time. So, okay, next slide. So I just want you to see that these are some of the ads so it was a fight. Let me tell you, it was a fight. Originally, with the ad agency, and, Tim worked at an ad agency. He could talk about this as well. But there was sort of ongoing fight. But finally, it was embraced by the ad agency and the client. And these were the ads they came up with. And we were really happy with them. So let's see this first one and just look at all the ways they show milk.
All across the country, milk brings families together. It's naturally nutrient-rich like no other beverage, and milk is the #1 source of calcium, potassium, and vitamin D in America's diet. Build strong families. Got milk?
Okay, and the next ad?
All across the country, milk brings families together. It's naturally nutrient-rich like no other beverage. Beyond calcium, milk's got B vitamins for energy and protein for mood and muscle. Build strong families. Got milk?
Okay, so I think you can see, and it really warmed our hearts when we saw that bit about the father out in the yard with the kids in the tent. Okay, you can go to the next one, Tim. Okay, so that's the milk example, and I hope and it really did, so it completely changed so we did the research and it changed who was the target of the effort, for the ads, and also some of the assumptions that were surrounding, what milk is. Okay, so now this project, a very different project in which we used ethnographic research, was for new product development. And, what we called the report was managing movement. Okay. So the objectives of this study was to look at how stuff was organized in and around home. So how do things move through the home? What strategies, tools, systems do people use, and what works and doesn't? And we wanted to explore the principles that framed behavior, the key metaphors or principles that were guiding people's behavior. Okay. Put it in social context, the problems, the tensions, and it was for new product development. The company, just like, I guess you could sort of implicitly think the Container Store, because that's what they were thinking of when they did this. Okay. All right, we went to 16 households in West Palm Beach and Chicago. And here we did it with these in-home interviews. And people also did some photo diary homework. So not audio diaries this time, but photo diaries. Okay. So now what came out of this was we really realized that within homes, there were two primary frames of reference or metaphors intention. So on the left there, first was this frame of reference or metaphor that everything should have a home, right? There's a notion that of stability and a physical place of presence, and it's like a container metaphor. So like a reference library or a museum, a collection unit, it's there, right? So if going down to the sort of little box below, so homes are containers like museum stuff as a home, and and that's kind of the past, but still relevant. And then there was more temporary virtual locations. So it was all implicitly all about changeability, transmutability, and it's like an array metaphor. What's there? So it's sort of like a computer screen or a surface display, like a web page, and images are kind of the mental model. So in that way, homes are more like portals, like Google, stuff's always in motion, and the scan of the surface is what lives. And increasingly, that's how we live our lives, and that's the tension. So, okay, next slide. So in that everything should, so the one on the left, everything should have a home, because people would say without that, it's a free for all. And so there's many classificatory schemes, like, put all like things together, all the kitchen pots in one place, all the, other stuff in one place, all the, collections together. And so, drawers, closets, shelves, the containers. Okay, next slide. So you can see, a typical kitchen cabinet, people put their collection of pots and pans, a very typical way that people organize things in their home. Put all those pots and pans together in one place. Okay. And these are more, I like the one with the temptations there. Oh, and their boxes or their drawers, put all of those kind of cosmetic items together, put all the music together. Okay, all containers. Now, another containers, and some of you might do this in your closet. Each of those bins there have a different reason. And then sort of the black bins, those are actually clothes that are completely clean, never been worn, and don't need hanging up, kind of like in-house clothes. In that blue bin, those are clothes that she had worn once, but they weren't dirty enough to wash, right? So they're kind of like in-between clothes. A lot of people put those in-between clothes like over a chair or at the end of the bed or sometimes the floor, but that was her in-between. And then the white thing, the hamper, those were clothes that were really dirty and needed to be cleaned. So you can see that it very, each thing has a different space that it lives in. Okay. Now, the temporary locations where the visual arrays take precedence, so the object and the place is mutable, is often about surrounding oneself with stuff when in the middle of working. Does anybody want to take a guess what that picture on the right is? What that woman does for a living or what's going on there? What was that? I didn't hear it.
Taxes.
Yes, exactly. She is actually an accountant. So it's tax time, and those piles that are on the floor, they're like sort of different clients' files that she still needs something for it or needs to add something. The ones on her desk there in that pile, those envelopes, they're envelopes going out the taxes. So, it's kind of like the person becomes the search engine pulling and dragging stuff. Okay, next slide. Now, another kind of visual array. Now, closets, you could say, are containers, but the kind of way closets have become is a desire to make them a visual array so that you see everything at a glance. So this woman actually had her closet fairly recently redone. It was a small closet, and the, California Closets type of group made her closet such a visual array. She loved this closet. She was crazy about it. Okay. And this is our accountant there showing how also right by her desk is, she's made a visual ray of, it's kind of like having a, vision board, but it's all the things that have to be done, just always living so that you always see them. Nothing's forgotten because you see it. Okay. Now, as we mentioned, that designated place versus temporary array is a struggle throughout the house. Like it's sort of a constant tension or constant struggle. So in this house where, that's a kitchen counter, where these things kind of live, some of those are kind of permanent things living there. Others, they get placed there. But if people were coming over, then whoop, they get scooped up and put in another room. So constant sort of mess. Okay. And here is also when it doesn't work, when the array becomes chaos or the designated place is not used. So on the right there, these are, like tool storage bins. But, if after you use it, you don't put it back into the storage, eventually you get a mess. Or on the left is one of those walk-in closets, which, as the people said, became a walk-over closet. Okay, next slide. Now, what we found out, and in many ways, this was sort of the anthropologically most interesting part of this, was that these orientational metaphors, or, what's flat, what's vertical, what's stacked, they provided really critical cues for people. So for Americans, when something is flat or horizontal, it usually means it's in use. So like this book by someone's bedside, the one that's on the nightstand, when it's flat, that kind of indicates I'm reading this book now, or I'm using it, right? When it's vertical or hanging, it means it's ready for the next use. So like ideal closets are those that like hang a lot, or, remember filing cabinets, vertical ones seemed really, like the organized, but not if papers were just inside, and stacked or packed as deep storage. Okay, next slide. So you can see, here's one of those filing cabinets with those vertical files that just seemed oh so organized, as well as that closet on the left there where everything is hanging, everything is, it's ready for use, it's hanging. Okay. And here's some more sort of proof or, indications, data, really, that things, when they're vertical, it means they're ready for use. So on the right there, the things like, it just seems so organized, right? Like in a garage, when the hand truck, the bike, the upright ladder are all kind of hanging there, vertical, ready for use. Or, and I'm sure some of you have done this before, like a bag that's for things that are going to be returned, kind of hanging on the doorknob. So it's ready to go. Okay. Now, so that was sort of flat, vertical, or stacked, but there's also cues about up and down. So there's our lady that organizes her, clothes that are clean, in between clean and dirty. She also just has this little sort of stand in her, this little piece of wood in her closet, which does nothing except raise things off the floor. And somehow that raising it off the floor makes the shoes seem more organized. Just like in the closet, somehow the shoes on the top there seem so much more organized than if they were just on the floor. So kind of like up means organized, okay? And these are just a little bit more evidence for up means more organized. So again, we have, and it's actually one bedroom, the same bedroom that has those clothes very organized hanging in the closet has the pile of clothes on the floor, sort of all disorganized. And what I really, can we go back to that slide? This one also, like this on the right, the picture on the right, this was someone's kind of work bag, which they would come home and they would put it in this little, sort of cubby. So they could put it on the floor, right? But somehow that's not quite, as organized as putting it inside the cubby a little bit up off the floor. Okay. And here is sort of, so that's up and down. Then there's front and back, like all these sort of cues of where things are. So front kind of means more now, current, immediate. because that surface lives, and back is in the past, Barry. So if it's in front of all those papers, probably now, or, if it's in the back, it's past. Okay. So this is all more front versus back. So if it's in front of things, it's usable, and because under a lid or behind the closed doors has come to mean not only not immediate, but often deeper storage. So what we found happening, it was that for many people, their closets or dressers that were no longer used on a daily basis. So in the bedroom on the left there, the clean clothes were kind of packed on top of the hamper. They never made it into the dresser anymore. They were just taken from that pile. Or these things down below were just, storage. Okay. So we made this little summary of all these different things about whether it's flat or vertical, so current or ready for use, or if it's vertical or stacked, and whether it's front or back. And so you can kind of see. So it was giving the client a tool with which to think about whatever they made, did it make it? Did it kind of, make it go vertical? Did it make things stay to the front? Was it an array versus a container? Did it sort of mitigate going to stacked? So those were the tools for them to think by. Okay, next slide. And it was very important to note that when signals got mixed, things just didn't work. So on the left there, this is someone's pantry. And, so they have things all lined up, they have them vertical in those plastic bags. But what happened was in the back, there was a plastic bag that had chips in it. So it kind of got to the back and then got lost. It became deep storage and never got used. So kind of a problem. And there on the right, this was like this sort of, it's like a dog's cage or something, and things got put there. Then eventually, like so much got put there that it was just packed, and then it's like deep storage. Okay. So that is the end of that one. And I have one last study to tell you about framing a difference, and then I want to take some questions. This one was about, can we go back to that one? It was about personal space. So it was about, investigate personal space in the US. And okay, you can go to the next slide. And their implicit thing was to investigate personal space in the US. But we reframe the question here. And in fact, if you think about, anthropology's tradition of going to other countries, which, we all know has many problems associated with it. But really, in those going to other countries, the anthropologists of former years were in fact really trying to say something about their own country. They were trying to give enlightenment to their own context by going to other contexts to see what else was possible and thereby learning from that. Really, that's what was going on. So we really argued strongly with the client that if you wanted to investigate personal space in the US and find out something new about personal space, it really would help to go to other countries. And I argued strongly that they needed to go to another country like France, where a lot of emphasis was put on sensation. And I also thought they should go to a country where not all goods were branded. And, they decided that Vietnam was the place to go. And so what this did, besides taking that traditional anthropology idea, it also created a comparative lens. So kind of allowing the fish to see the water and get ideas. So the idea was also by looking at what could be different in other places to get more insight into the US. Okay, next slide. So this was an actual slide from the report. So we talked about sensorial space. So there were different kinds of personal spaces. But in France, in a place where sensations mattered a lot, there was sensorial space where, in fact, people often customized how they interacted with that sensorial space by personalize their interactions with things. So maybe you move the chairs around to accommodate, small groups, or a fan, right? Like with your fan, or maybe the scent, right? So it's the feel, the smell, the movement, all of that is very important in creating your own sensorial space. And we also found out a lot about women's bags, giving people a sense of personal space and like kind of sensorial comfort. Okay, next slide. And in Vietnam, the big insight for the client, this is actually just a picture from a street, and I was going to play you a video, but we'll stop that. I don't know how many of you have been in Vietnam, or, Thailand is in some ways similar, but there was a big thing that there's like, it's actually relaxing to ride your scooter in crowded traffic, because you have to concentrate and also go with the flow, and you're totally, immersed in people watching. So it was a favorite kind of sport for people. And the other important thing about Vietnam that's worth saying, when people were so enmeshed in families and when thinking about the family, that often for young women, particularly, to find personal space was when they got out of the family and went outside. And so went out on their scooter for a ride or went to a cafe. That's where they could find their personal space. So I don't think that this client would have ever thought of American personal space as when out in the street, if they hadn't had that new lens to think through. So, okay, that's all of my slides. And I've given you, thank you. And I've given you, 3 studies, like Milk, where we reframe the target audience, and Personal Space, where we reframe the question, and the Home Organization, where we really brought in these kind of analytic metaphors, which was really inspired by, I don't know how many of you know the book Metaphors We Live by Lakoff and Johnson, but that's where that analytic idea about the orientation came from. So, okay, I'm just wondering if you have any questions or what the questions are. You all look like you're taking a test or something.
Any comments or questions? I kind of stand as a proxy here for Patty helping. Any reactions, comments? Yes.
On that last case study, I don't know if it makes sense that what exactly the client was, but was there any like results or takeaways that the client used from that information about for personal space, the insights that came out of it?
Did you hear that? Were there for the last study?
For the last study, were there implications that came out of it?
Yeah.
For the client. They used it as a kind of foundational, a foundation for many products that had to do with like air fresheners, right? So about smell. So that's how they used it. And it led from there, there was a big sort of innovation session where we, there were also psychologists involved with it, but it led to like various air fresheners. Yeah, we can stop sharing those slides, right? Or
Yeah, I'm just trying to pop you up big. I'm looking at the Zoom here. I'll get out of here.
Yeah, stop sharing at the top.
Okay. There you are.
now I see everybody a little
You
bit
see everyone big?
Yeah, a little bit better, yeah.
You in the corner. Okay.
Do you think the shift in the generation that runs the ad agencies and those who go into the workforce with ad agencies as anthropologists or ethnographers make a difference in how it's received?
Oh, good question. Could you hear that, Patty?
Do I think that the people who work in ad agencies or
I could respond to that too, so.
and people with anthropology background in ad agencies, does that change how things are received? Is that the question?
More so with like the generational shift that's currently happening. Like it's very, it's more prevalent and in your face now, especially with social media being a large gateway for everyone.
Huh?
Do you think that generational shift between the people who run these ad agencies and the anthropologists or ethnographers that go into the field change how the information is perceived or received?
That is a very good question. I guess that I see it as like a constantly changing environment, right? So that like as like the anthropologists change, right? As the people working inside the agencies change, the anthropologists are also changing and the knowledge is changing. So yes, it is constantly shifting. And I do think that agencies also feel like that they need to constantly keep up. They need to constantly keep up with where their customers are.
I'll add to that.
Yeah,
So I teach here at the school. I teach anthropological methods. I have some of my top students here in class. And we have a relationship, speaking with that agency, we have a relationship with BBDO. That's an agency I came from 10 years ago. And I'm happy to say they love our students. So we have a regular internship program with BBDO. We send students here that go over to BBDO. And this year they said, not just one internship, not just two. We have 4 students that came over on an internship because they were so impressed with the students. So it's a mix of this qualitative anthropological approach, but also quantitative approaches as well. Catherine, do you want to, I hate to put you on the spot, but you just got an internship with Blackwell, a really good consulting firm. And you talked a little bit about they like the anthropological approach, but you also learned other approaches. So talking to anthropology students, any advice of what companies are looking for? You're right in the market, so I put it to you.
Yeah, I kind of went public sector to private, so I U.S. Department of Commerce and I was BlackRock. And in both contexts, having a strong like quantitative background is positive. But in contexts where everyone kind of has that, or everyone's like online in person, I think having that qualitative perspective and being able to kind of humanize the numbers and humanize the data and bring that approach to things is really important. So for example, we ran a focus group and it was a really small, intimate thing, but we were able to reach out to people living in Korea and Vietnam searching to expand like their secondary education. And even though that was like really small, it provided us with more insights that we could use than like our large surveys did actually. So that was like really important and really valuable and valued by our kids.
Nice. I hope that helps. Bob in the back. Okay.
Hi, Patty. You look really good.
I just see you.
COVID.
Pardon?
I hope you look really good for someone with COVID. I hope when I get COVID, I look as good. You said something really interesting about the milk study, that you had a hard sell with the client at first.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear, and I think a lot of the younger people who would probably like to hear, what happened? How did you win the day? And then maybe in these other 2 cases, there were similar situations where you presented this reframing, and sometimes people don't know what the hell you're talking about. And how did you transpose what you did to a business sensibility, or at least an advertising sensibility for some of the people in the room that might have looked at you and been confused?
So first to like how we won the day or what was happening with the tension of the milk study. As some of you may know, or certainly a reality of this world, is that while we were off doing our study for the milk study, the creative team at the ad agency was also already kind of doing their thing. And so kind of like two parallel paths, or, I often feel like that metaphor of like the cart before the horse and all that kind of stuff. Like there's often multiple things going on. So, as I said, they had this idea of target mothers. So the kind of creative team had, gone ahead and decided and come up with some of their things for targeting mothers. So that's kind of why there was such a argument about it, because they had already moved ahead and done those things, and they didn't want to take a step back and do it differently. And so that the sort of tension of the fight of that really felt to, in ad agencies, there are planners, right, who are kind of the people responsible for the voice of the consumer or whatever. And so it was really the planner at the agency who had to who kind of, took on our side and had to take on that fight. So that's kind of, how that went in the thing. And also, I think very, very importantly, we eventually got the client on our side with, as I said, those audio diaries kind of made the client cry, right? I mean, it really moved them, and it really made them say, yeah, you know what? It is a losing battle to try. There was just no reason. Mothers had so many fights. If their kids didn't want to drink milk, there were so many other ways for them to make sure their kids were getting healthy foods, that they just, they knew it was a losing battle. So the client was on our side. And there's also, obviously, if the client is saying to the ad agency, no, do it this way, that also carries a lot of weight. So that's kind of how that happened. And in terms of how we reframe things, or that was your other question, right? How might we talk about reframing things? It's quite possible that I've used the word reframing to clients before, but I would say it's more like I would just say, there's another way to do this. I mean, just that openly, like, so for the, personal space study, we just kind of said, we've done studies for you before in the US. And if we just do this in the US, we're not going to find out anything, like it's just not going to work. Just kind of like, we're going to find out more by doing it this other way. So in that case, we just sort of told them. And if you talk about the pushback, the client eventually came back to us and said, well, okay, fine, you can do this study in other countries, but we're not going to give you any more budget. So if you can do the study for the amount of money we were going to give for the US study, go ahead, do it in 3 countries. And so that's in fact what we did, which was achieved by doing things like staying at friends' homes instead of staying at hotels, and recruiting by like friends of friends and things like that. Yes.
Maybe one more question. Or I guess we have time for 2 more. Yeah.
This is a bit of a difficult one. Is it difficult to implement ethics with an overstimulating world, like with various media platforms that are very capitalistic driven, with the prerogative to consume, even when it's not necessarily a necessity?
Can you start your question again?
Is it difficult to implement ethics, especially with this type of research, when we are gathering data on human behavior, when you're conjoining with advertising companies in an overstimulating world with various media platforms that constantly use advertisements for consumption with the prerogative of continuously buying?
So you're saying, like, how does one be ethical in not contributing to that overconsumption kind of world?
Yeah.
That's kind of, yes, it's a very good question. And I guess I would, also say, like, I think that, as a consultant, I was always lucky that in fact I could, choose if there were certain things that I really did not want to work for, right? So if it were, I turned down jobs to work for the military about, how to get guys to sign up for the military, or, I never wanted to do anything about cigarettes or, guns, things like that. And I had a colleague, well, Rita, who I wrote that book with, she never wanted to do any studies that were targeting children, right? So I think that's the first thing of like, which one? And then I think that, so that is the important part of that. So yes, it's kind of like an over-consuming world. Yes, it's all about ad agencies and all those kinds of things. But what products are we really talking about? Like, is there really anything inherently wrong with milk or, dairy farmers? I think doing something that helped the dairy farmers is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So I guess that's how, I always tried to be ethical or thought about ethics with, in doing this business. And I think it also sort of depends, the same kind of methods, as I mentioned, sometimes, I did studies for like Feeding America or Georgetown University. So I think it's also, how one can use these things within the scope. And then finally, some of these companies have also asked us to do projects on sustainability or green things. And of course, there's lots of problems. A lot of companies are also kind of like, greenwashing things and, just kind of trying to make it look like they're doing social good so that people will buy even more of their stuff. So, it gets very complicated. But I think it is absolutely possible to try to be ethical in this business. And that, one makes their sort of guidelines of what they'll do and not do, and the ways in which they contribute to the capitalist world we live in. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
I think there was then one more question. Pat, did you want to?
Sure. Hi, Patty.
Hi, I don't see you. Who?
Let's see.
Oh,
Can
well,
you, there.
hi.
Oh, hi,
In the
hi.
corner there, all
This
right.
is probably a larger question we have much time for, but following on the question about the generational shift in progress in advertising agencies, looking at the wonderful milk study, one of the things that struck me was that the people shown were likely to come from cultural backgrounds where milk consumption was at least theoretically part of their diet. And so the question is about really sample selection, when you are doing your research, who you reach out to and decide to interview or have diaries for. And the change in generations, what at least I've seen in somewhat related work, is that anthropologists have a role to play in organizations in expanding the cultural diversity of people who are included in studies. And to say, we have goals of diversity and inclusion and cultural change. And I'm just wondering, to what extent you've seen that, in your own research in the past few years.
Yes. So, actually specifically for that milk study, and, I didn't mention this, but the way that was done, there needed to be and there were families with young children and families with older children. And then among that, there were families that were, with so-called milk lovers, and milk rejectors. So families where people were really drinking milk and families where people were not drinking milk. So we had those, 4 types, basically: younger, older kids, milk lovers, and milk rejectors. And those parameters were chosen by, I guess I sort of believed in that case that, I accepted as true what they were saying about if kids didn't start drinking milk as little kids, they never were going to. And, with milk, there's also an issue, like some people do not have the enzymes to really digest milk. So, you're not going to target milk to those people. So there's that. But otherwise, for including others, yes, we always had a big role about trying to include others in the research. And in fact, in that book, we wrote sort of big about, one thing that some of these companies were doing, they were they were, there was the notion of the general audience, which is basically like the white audience. And then what they would do was like, you were African American or the Black audience only if you fit sort of the stereotypes. And if you were kind of middle class, you suddenly became the general audience, which had a way of like just constantly filtering things to the Black audience in a certain way. And those, I think of, this could be, it's like the generational shift. That has really, you can see it if you look at who is pictured in ads in the last year versus before, who's on magazine covers. So I think that, the agencies and companies have also, everyone is trying to be much more sensitive about diversity and inclusion.
All right. I'll just say thank you, Patty, very much. This is really terrific. There's your applause.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it and wish you could be here.
I know. I wish. Well, have a really great rest of the conference. I hope it's I'm sorry to miss the other workshops and the rest of the conference.
Appreciate what you said today. Very, very helpful. So, okay.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.